Around the time I turned 5, I developed a terrible fear that something was living under my bed. Of course, it was normal for a young child to have at least one irrational fear, so my mom didn't think much of it. Every night before I went to sleep, I would lift up the bed skirt and sweep my flashlight from the foot of the bed to the headboard and back again. I had to do this at least 5 or 6 times every night before I let my mother tuck me in. One night, she offered to look under the bed for me. She'd seen me do it so many times that it was easy for her to mimic my movements. She crouched down, lifted the bed skirt, and slowly swept the flashlight beam from left to right, then back again. I watched her from the top of the bed, clutching my teddy bear, and imagined a taloned hand reaching out and pulling her under. The thought that whatever lived under my bed could take my mother petrified me. After that, I insisted I had to be the one to check for monsters. In addition to looking under the bed, I also had to have a stuffed animal on either side of me so that I wasn't exposed to the edges. All of the corners of the comforters had to be tucked under the mattress, and my flashlight had to be securely wrapped in the crook of my arm. As my fear grew, I was convinced something was watching me from behind the bed skirt, and that it disappeared any time I looked under the bed. That started the rule that I had to be able to see under the bed at all times. So, Mom took off the bed skirt. At first, I think she thought it was a phase and that I would just grow out of it. But as the months passed, my fears didn't diminish. They only got worse. It took me at least 4 hours to fall asleep every night because I was so afraid of closing my eyes. When I closed my eyes, I saw the monsters. Ones with black hands and broken fingernails with blood dripping from empty eye sockets. Others were shaped like humans, but with 8 legs, like a spider. Some wore masks with horribly twisted and grotesque faces on them, made from real human skin. The more I tried to shut my eyes and go to sleep, the more terrified I became. There were times I swore I heard something breathing next to me, or feel the mattress move beneath me like a hand trying to push through and grab me. Closing my eyes scared me more than lying there all night with my eyes open. So I just didn't sleep much. One particular night, I was woken by a strange noise, like wood creaking. It wasn't like footsteps on stairs, it was as if someone was standing on 2 squeaky floorboards, shifting their weight slowly back and forth. The noise swelled from beneath me, and I knew it was the bad things under the bed. I bit my lip hard, and my hands shook violently as I clicked the flashlight on. Then I began to hear a moan. At first, it was so quiet it was nearly imperceptible. But it got louder and louder until it was coming from the walls. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like something was squeezing the air out of me. I was shaking but unable to move, the fear cocooning me. I was trapped. In a desperate attempt to make it all stop, I did the only thing I could think to do. I screamed. I screamed and screamed until I was safe in my mom's arms, and even then, I couldn't stop. My mother was always comforting and supportive of my rituals, at first. Then she noticed the dark circles under my eyes. I was easily irritated, even for a 5-year-old, and my nightly screaming fits grew more frequent. She tried to wean me off my nightly rituals, but I was persistent. One morning, she was helping me make my bed, and she asked me what I saw under the bed that scared me so much. I told her I didn't know. I was always scared that there might be something down there. Then she asked if I'd ever actually seen any monsters in my room. I started to say yes, but stopped. I couldn't remember ever actually seeing anything under the bed. It was always something I imagined. When I told her this, she smiled and said she knew how to cure my fear. While I knew my mother was the only person that could make the monsters go away, I didn't think her cure would work, no matter what it was. Still, I was curious, and I asked her how it worked. She told me we were going to play a game, and instead of imagining monsters, I was going to imagine good things. That way I would use all of my imagination for good things, and there wouldn't be any left to think of the bad things. The monsters. She sat on my bed next to me and told me to look over my side of the bed, and she would look over her side. I leaned over my mattress until I was completely upside down. I could see all the way under the bed to the other side, where Mom was also hanging upside down. She looked silly. Her hair was sticking up and her face turned red, so I laughed. She laughed too, then crossed her eyes and blew out her cheeks like a pufferfish. For the next couple of minutes, we made funny faces at one another, giggling and trying to see who could make the silliest face. When we were both upright again, she told me whenever I felt scared at night, instead of closing my eyes and imagining the bad things, I should look under my bed and think about Mommy, making funny faces at me on the other side. That way, I would see that there was nothing under the bed, and I would be safe, because Mom was there, so the bad things couldn't get me. It sounds stupid, but when bedtime rolled around, I was excited. I still performed all my nightly rituals, but I had been practicing imagining good things all day. Before my mom tucked me in, I asked her to make some more funny faces so I could memorize them. She laughed and said I was her brave little girl, and that the monsters didn't stand a chance against me. Then she kissed me on my forehead, said goodnight, and shut the bedroom door behind her. Feeling confident, I closed my eyes right away and didn't see any bad things. I started drifting to sleep, but then I began to hear a strange scratching sound, like nails dragging against the wood floors. My eyes snapped open, and I scanned the room, holding my breath. I waited another minute, but I didn't hear the noise again. I exhaled and rolled onto my side, shutting my eyes. A couple minutes went by, and I was drifting off again, when the scratching sound came back, louder than before. This time when I opened my eyes, it didn't stop. It just got louder and louder, like there were thousands of claws scraping against the windows. I lay there frozen, with my eyes wide open for what felt like hours, listening to the sound of the bad things clawing against the floor. I started to shut my eyes, but then I remembered what Mom told me to do if I was scared. As fast as I could, I sat up. The scratching stopped. The only sound was my ragged breathing. In the silence, I couldn't hear the bad things, but I could feel them watching me. I wanted to scream for my mother so bad. I thought hard about the funny faces, just like I'd practiced. Then very slowly, I lowered myself over the edge of the bed until I was upside down, looking underneath to the other side. The space beneath the bed was empty. The silence was unnerving, but there were no monsters, just like Mom said. I tried to imagine her making funny faces at me from the other side, but I couldn't. I closed my eyes and again tried to picture my mother's face, but the image just wouldn't come. My head began to pound, and fear closed around my lungs, making it hard to breathe. I couldn't remember my mother's face, and not just the funny faces, but her angry faces, her crying faces, her smiling faces. I couldn't remember any of them. My imagination didn't work under the bed. I knew it was the bad things. They were making me forget my mother. They were coming for me, coming to pull me under the bed and swallow me into a never-ending darkness. and I would be trapped with them forever. Panicking, I tried to pull myself up, but I realized my toes had unhooked from the mattress, and I had nothing to hold on to. I wanted to cry, wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, but then I heard a sound that hitched the breath in my throat. It was a muffled, but still audible, giggle. The laughter I heard was my own, but I wasn't laughing. Terrified, I tried to scream, but the bad thing was laughing. It had stolen my voice, and it was getting louder and louder. Too scared to move, and unable to call for my mother, I couldn't do anything except watch, eyes wide, afraid to blink. My heartbeat thrummed rapidly in my head, and that laughter, my laughter, crescendoed until it was so loud I was drowning in it. That's when I noticed a dark shape begin to descend from the other side of the bed. A face emerged, upside down, the lifeless color of its skin reflecting white. For a tiny moment, I thought it was my mother. Its hair was black like hers. Then, as it slowly descended lower and lower, I saw the rest of its face, and I knew this was not my mother. This thing, whatever it was, whatever nightmare it had crawled out of, wasn't even human. Where its features should have been, there was just smooth, white skin. And even though it didn't have eyes, I could feel it watching me. Its gaze burned right through me, turning my blood to ice. With growing horror, I realized that even though it had no mouth, it was the thing laughing, the thing that had stolen my voice. The longer I stared at it, the more petrified I became. Trapped, I did the only thing I could think to do. I shut my eyes. I counted 3 seconds pass by in total silence. And 3 more. Just when I thought it was safe to open my eyes again, I felt a breath on my shoulder. I bit my tongue and tasted blood. It was right next to me now. I could feel its long black hair touching my face. It took 2 deep, rattling breaths. Then in my mother's voice, but at the same time, in a voice completely inhuman, it said,
"Funny face."
Then there was darkness. The next thing I could remember was waking up in a hospital with a minor concussion. My mom said I hit the wood floors so hard she heard it from all the way in the basement. I never told her what happened, but I asked if I could sleep in her bed for a while. She said yes, of course I could. I think she felt responsible since I'd gotten the concussion playing the funny face game. I'm not sure what I saw that night. I honestly tried to forget about it as best I could. I never looked under the bed again, but it wasn't even until I reached high school that I stopped having nightmares about it. Still, to this day, 20 years later, I try not to think about it. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I find myself staring at the ceiling in complete darkness. And if I listen hard enough, I swear I can still hear the sound of my own quiet laughter, even though my lips are pressed tightly together.
Oh, he's right to your right.
Okay.
Oh, it's wrong.
Okay.
Why did you turn around?
You told me to go back! You can't have it both ways!